Do it to it. Are we going to leave the door open for a minute? All right, folks, let's talk about locksport. Let's talk about locksport and security. My name's Bill Sempf. Hi. This is going to be one of those crowds, isn't it? I've got far too many people in this crowd who know me far too well. So for all of you who don't, I'm sorry. Oh, hi. But they're coming from everywhere, too. I'll tell you. I'm a husband. My wife is in the back being absconded with by a large number of the Columbus security community. I also label myself as father, even though we decided not to bring any kids with us this trip. And I'll tell you what, even though there are a lot of kids here and our children would have had a tremendously good time at this con, I would like to point out how obscenely glad we are that we did not bring any children with us to this trip. For us. Not for the kids. Nothing against you. You would have had a great time playing with my son, I guarantee it. But yeah, it's not going to happen. I am an author. I write for Wiley. I write dummies books. That should give you an idea of where you should put the level of bar for the talk, okay? So, I've written, well, the most recent book that's on the shelf is C# 2010 All-in-One. I just finished doing review for C# 5.0 All-in-One. I finally got them dropped the year, thank goodness. And also have a Windows 8 programming book out. So, that's something else you should know about me. I'm a dev. I am not a security professional. I do not pretend to be a security professional. I do not have any letters after my name that relate to security at all. I'm a coder. That's what I do for a living. Call myself a software composer because of this book. If you have not read this book, you absolutely must read this book. You especially must read this book, young lady, because it is a book about computer science for children. 136 pages that taught me more about computer science than 7 years in college. No, that isn't a joke. Of course, I have 3/4 of a music degree, so that sort of explains it. But that's neither here nor there. So I strongly recommend you read Laura Lipsum. It will change the way you view computers forever. So that's just, it doesn't have anything to do with this talk. It's just important because it has something to do with where I'm coming from. I am a home brewer. I did not bring any with me. If you did, invite me to the room later. That sounds weird. Never mind. I'm obviously, you're going to have to discuss that with my wife, who's having a conversation with Jason, so it doesn't matter. Or John or somebody. I am obviously a lockpicker. That's what we're here to talk about in some way, right, is lockpicking. I'm also a ninja. However, my school has gone defunct, so I need a new ninja school. But that's the way it goes sometimes. I have a habit of saying things that nobody wants to hear a lot of the time. In the dev community, it's very improper to talk about things like, hey, you know, if you do that, anyone can use this app, whether they have credentials or not. When you say things like that, people don't like you. So I have kind of gotten the label of insurrectionist, and I wear it with pride. So how did I get here? It's kind of a long story. Clearly, I'm a dev. I'm not a security guy. So it's a long and winding tale. Where's my box? All right, my boxes are gone, but that's okay. So I learned to pick at DEF CON 15. As it turns out, my wife, who's in the back of the room, went with me to DEF CON 15. We had an awesome time. I'm sitting in some boring seminar about MNAP, and I get a phone call on my phone, on my cell phone. I pick it up. I'm like, I'm in a talk. What do you want? She's like, you have got to come up here. They're teaching us to pick locks. I went, what? All right. Yes, you did. You were very excited. So I go up to the Lockpick Village at DEF CON. How many people have been to the Lockpick Village at DEF CON? Yeah, okay, so you know what I'm talking about. It is packed asshole to belly button with teenagers, it seems like. I don't know why. It's all young kids just like packed in there going, wow, lockpicking, this is awesome. And there's all these kids in there. I'm 40, so I can call them kids. There are all these kids in there, and then in the middle of the table is this shining blondness that is my wife sitting directly across from Deviant Olem. All right, and his presentation's on the monitor behind him, and sitting between them is a half-empty bottle of Jack Daniels. Somehow inside myself, I knew that that bottle was full when they started. And she's picking like some 6-pin something with a set of borrowed picks, and I'm thinking, oh well, I'm in trouble. And so I thought, all right, well, I've always, this is on my bucket list too, so I'm going to learn to pick as well. And I got into it, and it fell right in. I mean, I'm a big big believer in puzzles. That's all software development is, right? You get a list of puzzles to solve, and you solve them one by one. That's what requirements are. So what happened is I ended up coming back and starting the Columbus Locksport International chapter. I'm from Columbus, Ohio. And that went real well for a long time. I started it with my members of my martial arts group, and it kind of grew from there to a pretty good group. When I went to DEF CON 17, I met Doug Farr, who's the president of Locksport International. And he and I had a great time. We talked a lot and shared a lot of insight back and forth about chapter growth and stuff like that, and how organizations work together and what Locksport's all about. Look, my boxes started showing up. That's very interesting. And then I got a text from him when I got back saying, hey, I'm promoting you to the administrative director of Locksport International. Awesome. So what's that basically mean? It means I'm Doug's bitch. That's what it comes down to. It works out okay. So the Columbus chapter started growing to the point where I couldn't hold it in my living room anymore, even though my living room is fairly substantial. So we moved to the Columbus Idea Foundry. I'll talk a little bit more about that later, but that gave us a hackerspace to meet in. So we grow and we grow and we grow. And lo and behold, I'm here, and that one has a box as well. So I apparently have some work to do in this presentation. I have since turned over the Columbus chapter to John Snyder, who's sitting in the back of the room. I don't know, just sitting there doing his thing, I guess, right? Yeah, okay. And it just gives me a chance to spend a little bit more time with the international organization and spend a little bit more time talking to people about Locksport, which is pretty cool. I know that's a stir stick, but I can't help but use it as a straw. I don't know why. So, what am I doing now? Well, when I wrote this talk, I could say I'm teaching one of only 3 public, regular lockpicking classes in the nation. I don't think that's true anymore. I think there's more now. But it used to be that of the regular public lockpicking classes, only Schuyler's and something out west that I don't really know about were being scheduled regularly. Now I think there's a couple other people that are doing it, but certainly I was teaching one of the first. I'm helping John, as much as I can, manage the Columbus chapter of LI. And we've got something like 136 members, regularly have 20, 30 people at meetings. We spend a lot of time talking to new people about Locksport, and also talking to established pickers and people who are used to the information security and physical security scene about new things that are going on and just having fun and drinking beer and screwing around. I am still the administrative director of Locksport International. I'm in charge of helping bring on new members and bringing on new chapters. So I spend a lot of time talking to people about things like how to communicate with local media about Locksport, how to present yourself as a Locksport organization, and things like that. For instance, we just started our Atlanta chapter. Atlanta, Georgia, right? Is that right? Yeah, I think so. I think it's Atlanta. And the new chapter president emails me and says, hey, I want to talk more about tactical lockpicking. And I said, that's awesome. Really advise you don't put that in your press releases, because what that says is, we're teaching burglary here. Not usually really good press. So I get to deal with wonderful things like that. I also spend a lot of time taking Locksport villages to the people. We have an awesome Locksport village here at DEF CON. DerbyCon, sorry. Said DEF CON too many times a few minutes ago. At DerbyCon, run by fools. Strongly recommend you go. If you have not yet been, you will learn a lot. But I take them as part of the Idea Foundry to all over the place. For instance, this is one at a woodworking show in Columbus. The Idea Foundry isn't just a computer-type hackerspace, it's a maker-type hackerspace. So they've got a ton of woodworking equipment and other things. And the woodworking show contacted them and said, hey, come bring stuff other than woodworking, because we found out that our members are kind of tired of woodworking and they want to learn other things. All right, whatever. So I brought the whole Locksport thing and taught a whole bunch of 70-year-old men how to pick locks, which was quite a treat. Finally, I spend an inordinate amount of time being a pusher. That is a pick distributor. I mean, when you get in the Locksport business, you sell lock picks because people learn and they go, this is awesome. Where do I get these picks? And if you can say, here, 20 bucks, it makes life a lot easier for everybody. So I spend a surprising amount of my time dealing with picks, explaining to people how to work with them, and, well, obviously, in teaching Locksport, and also in explaining the legal implications and realities like, yes, you can carry them in Ohio, but if you're wearing a black hoodie and you're standing in front of a 7-Eleven which is broken into at 3 a.m., you're probably going to get arrested. Things like that. So what's this all have to do with what I'm talking about today? Well, what it has to do with is that I have found a remarkable crossover between the lessons I learned dealing with the public and locksport and the realities of putting up with information application and operational security in the DevOps space. You know what I mean? Dealing with the realities of users in security. And what I'd like to do is just spend a few minutes and list some of the things that I've thought about, and then love to hear your thoughts at the end, or if you're particularly enthusiastic during, though I don't have real good vision, so if I don't see you, you might want to jump down and do this. So the first thing, this shouldn't come as a surprise to anybody, there is quite an interest in security amongst the public. When I was running my classes twice a month, which I was for many, many months, it was sold out every class. 15 people, every class. And this is with a pretty limited distribution list. I think the same is true in the information security world. When you, both from the side of understanding what hackers do, and also from the blue team side of, hey, I want to be online, but I want to be protected, there's a really significant amount of real public interest in what is going on here. And there isn't enough discussion of, by God. There isn't really enough public debate, public discussion about what it is we do in the real world. But what I've found with regards to that is that locksport is an excellent analog to information security. There's a lot of similarities. It's a straightforward example of very real security, right? Because what all of us do on the information space is really more complicated than we can describe to your average public user of the internet or corporate user of a network. I mean, it just is. I mean, even certainly talking about the bits and bytes of something like a buffer overflow is far, hell, I don't understand it. But even if you try to do an analog and draw boxes and show what you're talking about, you're not going to get that information across to people. But when you view things from the perspective of locksport, things get real simple all of a sudden because you've got something over here you want to protect, and you've got someone over here who wants it. What do you need to do? You need to put something in between them that protects this from this. Then you make sure that this person knows how to use it. Most important, right? Because what happens if you put a fancy lock on your door and then fail to lock it at night? Absolutely nothing happens. That's right. It's not a good thing. So all of the pieces of information security kind of falls into place here, including the realities that security comes in levels, which is kind of a hard concept for most people, as I found. In the lockpicking world, you talk about residential locks and pick-resistant locks and high security locks. And that is a very tough concept for people because no one really likes shades of gray, which you deal with a lot in locksport. You can have a residential lock that's remarkably difficult to pick. You can have a residential lock that comes open when you put the pick in the lock by accident. And because of this relative simplicity of locksport, you can explain to people, look at this key. See how it's flat, basically? I mean, yes, okay, there's ridges in it, but basically all these biddings are at the same level. They're all around 3, 4, 5. So because everything's kind of flat, when you stick that rake in there, the lock just comes open. That's a very simple way to explain very difficult things in the information security space. Sometimes things are really, really complicated to us because we have to configure them, sometimes even code them. But from the user's perspective, they're really quite simple, and we need to remember those things so that we can focus on user education and make sure that when we explain something to the end user, it makes sense to them in their space. Sometimes locksport makes an excellent analog to this. Getting what you pay for is another thing that's really surprisingly hard to get across to people. Even though they can look at something like going to Lowe's and picking up a Schlage lock for $30 as compared to going to securitysnobs.com and getting an Abloy buy lock for $100, they can say, but they're both locks. Yes, but you realize that they're different prices for a reason. Well, this is a snobby lock. Okay, maybe that's true. But the fact is that there's something that provides higher levels of security. Security is a commodity, both in the physical world, just like in the information world. Commodities are priced based on their quality and the user's desire for them, right? That's how commodities are priced. Look at the price of oil, right? It's based on supply, demand, quality. That's what you're looking at. The same thing is true in the security space. You get what you pay for, or you should. With information security, it's a little bit more gray because sometimes you pay for good salesmanship, not necessarily good quality. Am I right? You have to have a little bit more perspective, but the analog is still fairly solid. Yes, we can use this set of tools over here for this, but if we get help, I realize it'll cost money, but if we get help from people who are fairly expensive, but still we know they're good because we have their references, it will be better for us later. That balance that you have to explain to people is really hard for a lot of people to get. When I give my class, I teach basic picking at the beginning. How many people here have been to a beginning lockpicking class of any kind? The Lockpick Village or what? Okay, that's embarrassing. The rest of you, your evening's shot. You're going to the village. I'll meet you there. All of you should know how to pick a lock, okay? The reason is because you, whether you know it or not, you believe that the thing on your front door is preventing people from coming in. All right? Even after you are taught that it's not, which you will learn very quickly once you learn to pick. Trust me. You will be in a position where you go, yeah, that's never going to happen. It's really scary, though, isn't it? It is, but it's never going to happen. Risk is perceived as something that is acceptable, even when it isn't. And teaching locksport leaves you in a position where you have to force people to decide what is genuinely important to them. So one of the things that I say to people all the time is, I don't care if you leave your doors unlocked when you leave, just make sure that they're locked when you're there. And I get a lot of funny looks. But honestly, what's more important? The crap in your house, your TV, or your family? Really? You would be amazed how many people have never done that risk assessment in their head. I have had people not say anything for the rest of, very vocal people, not say anything for the rest of the class when I make that analogy. The same thing is true in information security. We are forced with taking somebody who has their ego invested in a company and saying, you need to decide what is really important here because you cannot possibly protect everything. And that is remarkably difficult to do, isn't it? It's something that's hard. And information security, locksport teaches us that that's hard, but unfortunately doesn't really teach us what to do about it. That's still a really tough problem, in my opinion, as far as risk assessment is concerned, is how do you get that across to them? I'll do that in some future talk if I ever have some kind of epiphany and figure it out. Maybe Brett will figure it out. He's really smart. On that topic, once you get people to understand the risk they're faced with, getting them to change is very hard. Objects at rest tend to stay at rest. And that's never more true than in security. especially if people have never understood a threat before, have never actually had, have never, in the information security world, the physical world's a lot easier. It's pretty obvious you've been broken into 90% of the time. In the information security world, it's significantly more difficult, because you can be owned for years and not even know it, right? So even when they know, it's going to be a lot harder to get that information across, that change is needed. Yeah. Okay. So this one shouldn't particularly be a surprise. On a slightly different track here. Most of the people who come to my class come because I'm teaching forbidden knowledge. Lockpicking is forbidden knowledge. It's on the bucket list, right? It's something you need to learn because it's dark and secret. That same perception lies around information security. The guys that are in the information security department go into their, dark room with the blocked off windows and do magic stuff. You can leverage that mystique to your benefit. Okay? Introducing people to, for instance, Johnny Long's no-tech hacking book is a great way to encourage that kind of, focus on the mystique around what we do. That it's not all just configuring the routers. That we're doing a lot more than that behind the scenes. The user education is very important. Teaching your developers not to put your source code on Stack Overflow. Teaching your users not to just blindly help anyone who calls them, especially when they're asking for specific things. If there is that perceived mystique around the information security space, the users will make more of an attempt to pay attention to what we're trying to say than they would otherwise. That is certainly true in the locksport space. The people come wanting to learn how locks work, and they leave understanding physical security, at least at a base level. Certainly much more than they did. And that's kind of what we want to do in the information security space. We want to lure them with, hey, let me teach you some cool stuff about Facebook. And then have them leave going, I got to make sure to be real careful who I click yes to on my friends list. Or if I'm in charge of the company's Facebook group, I got to focus up a little bit more. Those are the kind of parallels that need to be drawn there. And that's where we can use that focus on the black fog that's kind of around the whole security piece to our advantage. You don't have to go much further than the TSA with most people to make them understand that security theater is a big deal. The core one that I get all the time is the big debates about whether or not you have an alarm in the house. So how many people have a home alarm system? About a third. There's obviously a big debate as whether or not they do anything, right? Because a lot of people get in when the alarm isn't running. A lot of people don't care because it's smash and grab. It's a tough call. The alarm companies are selling to us, playing on our fears. Let us keep your family safe. Well, okay. There's a risk there, but we've got to decide where the risks lie. The use of security theater, playing on our fears, is very prevalent in the physical space. The same thing is true in the information space, and we've got to be careful not to fall into that ourselves as information security professionals. All right? If we continue to play on the fears of our users, they will stop listening to us. It's almost better to use the mystique of the hacker, even though that has its problems as well, than it is to leverage fear every single time. Right? Having a dozen locks on your door doesn't really help you if the burglar just follows you in when you open it yourself. So, as it turns out, security is hard, be it physical or information. People don't particularly care to think a whole bunch. We let's see, how do I approach this here? Locksport is a very simple concept to understand once people learn the basics of picking. Because here is a lock. It protects something. It's designed to be opened with a key. When you explain to someone it can be opened without the key, suddenly things get really simple for them. Information security isn't so simple. Explaining to your CEO why they shouldn't tape their business card to the top of their laptop is a lot harder than explaining to him that a lock can be opened without a key. It's just hard to do. It requires a lot more steps. And people don't want to take that step. They don't want to follow the path that's required to understand the implications of every single action that they take in life. Chris Nickerson had an awesome analogy earlier today in his talk, where he, and I'm going to paraphrase a little bit, but he was talking about some hipster CEO of some hit new internet company who's on Twitter all the time. It's like, hey, headed to Buenos Aires or whatever, yeah, I'm getting on my flight, all right, cool, hey, yeah, we're taking off from the thing, I got to go dark, but we're going to be, landed in 9 hours. Oh, they got Wi-Fi on this flight. Cool. That's what's going on here. Hey, we're landed in 30 minutes. No big deal. And then there's a tweet that says, oh, my assistant's such a joker. She's got a guy standing here with a placard with my Twitter address, Twitter alias on it to pick me up. And then the next tweet was in Spanish. Explaining to a CEO why maybe that level of information distribution is bad is hard. They don't understand why that's bad. And people don't want to trust you because you're trying to explain something that's hard to them. Making an analog to the physical space makes things easier, I think. It really does. On the topic of things that are hard, security in general makes things harder to do. Users are afraid that security impacts usability. Speaking as a developer, I can tell you, they're right. If the user has to log in every time they step away from their keyboard for 30 seconds, they're going to get really, really upset. And they're going to tell the customers how upset they are. How many of you have made a phone call to a customer, to a call center, and have the person on the other end of the phone go, oh man, this computer system, it sucks. I'll have your information in just a second, but it's really slow today. I don't know what's wrong with it. Oh, wait, oh, no, I got to type that in again. Can you give it to me again? How many times have you heard that? You don't want security to be the reason for that, right? So, on the physical side of things, what I tell people is, you need to make things easier for the people in your life, the people in your sphere. But if you have, for instance, a 4-digit garage code that you give out to everyone, you are exactly 4 digits on a 24-power scope from burglary, or 4 digits and a pissed-off neighbor from burglary, depending upon who you give your code to. If you've got a lock, a front door with 8 locks on it, and you use 8 different keys to get into them, you're going to have a really hard time having anybody ever watch your cats. Because it's such a pain in the ass to watch your house. And everybody will be so paranoid about getting in and getting out. Alarm systems do the same thing. I mean, has anybody ever had to watch their neighbor's cat and they've got some fancy alarm system and you're thinking, oh my God, please don't let me screw this up because if the cops show up, it'll cost them $250. What am I going to do? I'm the Idea Foundry where I teach locksport. They've got one of those alarm systems hooked up to the police. I'm terrified of typing in the code wrong and having the cops show up. Just because it'll cost money, not because I'm worried about the cops showing up. Just not cool stuff. This is another thing that another parallel I've drawn that I don't have a good solution to. But the fact is that in the information security space, we need to find ways to make things more secure without making them harder. I don't know what that is. But the best example I found recently is implementing 2-factor authentication. right? You can have a password rule that requires people to have 19-character passwords, change them every other day, and use every single key on the keyboard once a month. But then all they're going to do is write down their password and stick it in a sticky note on the side of their monitor and put it in their wallet, carry it home, and put it on their computer at home. It doesn't work. Password policy is broken. Two-factor auth actually simplifies things. Once people get in the pattern, I mean, how many people here use Gmail users? How many people use two-factor auth? Wow. I guess this is a security con. I gave this talk to a development group, and I had one person raise their hand, and about the size of the crowd too. Yeah, it's easy. Once you get in the pattern of it, it's easy. You've always got your phone anyway. If you don't, you got the little slip of paper. You're covered. No big deal. Frankly, even if you can't, if you're someplace weird, you can't get in. Worst case scenario, you can't get in. Is your email really that important? It really makes you, goes back to that risk thing. Makes you judge things a little bit differently. Two-factor auth doesn't actually make things that much harder. In the long run, it makes things a lot easier. So we've got to find those kind of solutions in the information security space that makes things easier, not harder. How am I doing for time? Oh, good. Every day, we do out-of-the-box thinking. How many people here would consider themselves red team attackers? Nobody? Nobody in this crowd is red team person? Wow, okay, never mind. Well, it's less true on the blue team side of things, because, frankly, on the blue team side of things, where I consider myself as well, on the defender side of things, your consistency is your friend, not out-of-the-box thinking. But on the red side, what's the enemy of consistency, right, is spontaneity. Let's do something completely different, completely wild, that nobody would have ever thought of. That's the key thinking. You'd be amazed how stuff that's old hat to us is a revelation to people that come to my classes. Shoulder surfing, for instance, which is the kind of the Zen example that I use out of Johnny Long's book. Is, just standing over somebody's shoulder and watching them work. People go, do that? Well, I mean, yeah, if you want to get some kind of information from somebody, of course you do that. Walking behind them when they walk in their door, seeing what PIN code they type into the PIN pass, or just following them into the door. Any of those things is perfectly legitimate if you're trying to get a piece of information, trying to get someplace you're not supposed to be. When people challenge me on the locksport side of things about quality of lock and whether or not I'm teaching people to be a burglar because I'm teaching them to pick the most common locks found in the United States, I point out to them that people don't actually use lock picks to commit burglaries. They use crowbars. I mean, crowbars commit burglaries, not people. No, wait, I'm sorry. And that's a revelation. That's a surprising revelation for people. Here we take the odd for granted. In this group, as a community, we take the unusual for granted every day. But, with blue hair, no big deal. No. Peeing in the elevator, no big deal. Whatever. It's just part of what happens, right? Part of the stuff that goes on. But you need to understand that we're looking at things through a very unusual prism here. And that most people don't view the world this way. So when you're trying to build user education, take off the hat for a while. Go to the park. Enjoy nature. Something. Whatever you need to do to forget this and return to the way the rest of the world views things. And then it'll make it easier to build meaningful messages. Thank you. Thank you very much. On the other hand, not everyone is a sheeple. And a tremendously large quantity of people know that security isn't everything it's cracked up to be, but they don't know how to fix it. And where I find that balance is the people who come to the locksport meetup versus the people who come to the class. Very interesting. So I have two things that go on. And generally, I balance them every other week, right? So on the third Wednesday of every month, we have the meetup group, which is actually on, if you go to locksport.meetup.com, you can find us. I mean, and the other 12 chapters. We meet regularly every month. We have some special topic, but largely we sit and drink beer and pick locks, right? The people who come to that largely get it. They know there's a problem. They know there's a problem on the physical security side, and often they know there's a problem on the information security side. The people who come to the class, on the other hand, they don't get it. They don't know. They're there because lockpicking is on their bucket list. And that they're the ones for whom that idea of, we're going to use a crowbar on a lockpick. That's a shocking revelation. The key is to finding the difference between those two people. It's extraordinarily difficult sometimes. And even then, those freedom fighter types who come to the Locksport meetups, who are carrying a Maxpedition bag and are packing and, the whole deal, even they are not educated on, what lock to buy. They know that people can pick locks, but they don't know what to do about it. The same thing's true on the information side. I had a discussion just this last meetup with a guy crying out loud, he makes a living as a, basically personal defense trainer. He didn't have a pin on his cell phone. He picks up his iPhone, swipes it, it's open. It's like, dude. You realize that if something went wrong and a cop pulled you over, they could just take everything off your phone. He's like, no. Yeah, I went through the Ohio Supreme Court about 3 years ago. You need to have a pin on that phone. He put one on right there. He didn't know. And that's the problem. We don't know who gets it and who doesn't, and even the people who get it don't really know what information they need to have. I lost my straw somehow. It seems like, if you watch the press, watch the news, that everyone has been robbed and beaten, had their front door bashed down, and their car burned. But really, not that many people have. The realities of today's press and the ubiquity of the internet have made it such that physical security incidents have been blown way out of proportion and have kind of sanitized everyone. They're used to hearing about it, so there's this weird dichotomy of being concerned about it, not understanding that it's happening to everybody, but it isn't because they don't know anybody who it's happened to. Strange balance. The same thing's true in the information security side of things. We all go and read the blogs and watch our Twitter stream and subscribe to all the cool feeds that tell us all the IEEE is, saved 10,000 user accounts on the 100,000 user accounts on the Pastebin or OpenFTP. And we think, oh, God, everyone is falling apart. But really, that's not the case. And that balances pretty well with the physical security side of things. And I think it would, in general, behoove us all to look at both sides of that equation and realize that maybe we need to make sure we're not overbalancing our focus on real security based on what we read in the press or from our vendors who have a vested interest. Which is also true in the locksport world. I mean, not really in the locksport world, but in the physical security world. I mean, Arrow Locks makes their money by selling locks. So, if somebody comes up behind me, let me know. So, are they going to talk about break-ins and stuff and whatever? Yes, they are. So, whatever. Oh, yes. And then we're covered with a broadening, not just a quality issue as far as media coverage is concerned, but a broadening media coverage, right? So we've got more and more blogs, more individuals gaining their own cachet as far as their quality. Quality writers, right? Good salespeople who are talking about the talking about the in-depth details of attacks and in-depth details of the, individual hacks and all these things that freak us out. Oh my God, I don't know if I run this scan on this machine, and what about our dev server? Oh, I've got to check this stuff. You need to consider curtailing some of the content you draw in. Because if all you hear is bad news, that's all you'll believe. And that's something I've gotten out of those freedom fighter types who are on the preparers mailing lists and forums and stuff and are, they're bludgeoning themselves with content saying, the federal government's going to take over and take all our stuff and there's bad guys everywhere and we're all going to die. And that's how they come to the locksport meetup, thinking, I need to know how to do this because I want to be able to break into the grocery store when Armageddon happens and the zombies attack. And it's like, dude, listen, you've seriously got to take a chill pill. I mean, really. That same story can be told of us. It's not quite so bad, but when you're, driving home tomorrow, I want you to think about, hey, am I maybe reading too much bad stuff? Finding reality is hard. Figuring out what works and what doesn't work is very difficult in locksport. You can take a 5-pin lock, rake it all day long and not get it open and not really understand what's wrong. I had a great example of this. While the locksport meetup was going on, I'm sitting and going through locks in the beginner's box, the easy box, trying to make sure everything works right. Couldn't get this lock working, couldn't get this lock working, couldn't get this lock working, couldn't figure out what was going on. Finally, I get my flashlight, look up in there. There's a pin completely sideways jammed up inside there. If I hadn't looked, I wouldn't have found it. I mean, how many people in my class had been sitting and trying to pick that lock and just thought they failed? Reality is sometimes hard to find in the locksport world. That's very much true in the information security space too. Sometimes we need to take a moment to do some metrics, figure out what's working and what isn't working. Are you looking at both how many successes versus failures you're having in login with a particular system or a battery of systems? Are you considering those pieces? That's one of the kinds of things that you need to do to make sure that you're getting the reality that you need, not just listening to the squeaky wheels, but actually going and checking for yourself to make sure that things are working as you expect. I talked about this briefly before, but the core point here is that some people are on the winning side of the equation and some people aren't. And we all need to be willing to bifurcate our roles here and deal with both sides as needed, right? Some people completely are on our side of the equation and are easy to work with, and some people are not. And you've got to be willing to spread, especially if you're a one-man shop or close to it, or if you're a manager and you're dealing with many people, you've got to be willing to spread out your education, spread out the levels of security access that you're giving, security functionality you're giving people, to balance against two different kinds of people. So, in general, much of what the information security community thinks about users is largely true. As a developer, we kind of have the whole, if we could only take the users out of the system, everything would work fine kind of perspective. And the same perspective seems to be kind of true in the information security community, and it sort of rings true there. A lot of the flaws that humans have in information security seem to be more or less balanced with the perception of information security. And because of that, user education matters even more than ever before. We need to make sure that people get it on their own level, right? We're spreading the message out so that we can make sure that the people that have the level of security that they need get the education they deserve and really get what they're dealing with. The third piece is that locksport is a tremendously awesome gateway drug to all of this. If you personally haven't had the pleasure of opening the lock you thought was keeping your garage safe all this time, you need to. Because it'll change the way you view security. And since this is what we do for a living, I think maybe changing views is a good thing. What's more, you might even want to consider going back and teaching your InfoSec staff, or maybe even your company, a little bit about physical security once you get good at it. Or call your local locksport group and see if they'll come in. It's remarkable how it makes people change the way they view what's important. Change the way they view risk, and change the way they view their perception of the break between what is out there and what is in here. It's been very impressive for me to see these things. So I'm Bill Sempf. You can grab me on, I'm easy to find because my last name is relatively unique. You can grab me on any of the social forums. Despite all the scary things that are out there, I'm pretty much everywhere. Go to the Locksport Village and pick a lock. Now. Go. If you have any questions, we'll take them now. Otherwise, you're free to go drink beer. And thank you very much for attending. I hope you learned something. Thank you very much. Yes. The quickest way is to have a 3-pin lock. A 3-pin lock and a diamond, a half diamond. That's been the way I've gotten people from 0 to 60 instantly, because pretty much anybody can do it. Now, if you really want that super quick win, carry a 1-pin. But the fact is that everybody's going to know it's a 1-pin. A 3-pin lock's actually a bit of a challenge. Also, make sure that it's pinned, kind of 565 or something like that, so that it's easy to get there. But that's a great question. Thank you very much. What's that? Well, that's a wafer lock. So that's going to be a rake, right? What you want to do is actually take a quick set, like a deadbolt lock, and take it apart and repin it. Field strip it, repin it so that it only has 3 pins in it. And then say, that's the lock on your front door, which is true unless they live in a fancy apartment complex or gated community or something. And a 3-pin lock is very easy to pick, especially if it's pinned kind of flat. It puts it home, because a file cabinet lock is, well, it's just a file cabinet lock. But that